May be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Good morning.
Has anyone attempted to approach you or speak with you, or have you learned anything about the case in the time we separated yesterday and got back together this morning? State wish to call a witness.
State calls Dr. Mark Glickstein.
Please stand here. With the clerk.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Right this way, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Would you please tell the jury your name,
Yes, I'm Dr. Mark Glickstein,
and would you spell your first and last name?
M-A-R-C-G-L-I-C-K-S-T-E-I-N.
And how are you employed?
Well, I'm a diagnostic radiologist. I work with the University of Pennsylvania, reading radiology studies for them.
And what is a diagnostic radiologist?
Radiologist is a physician who's undergone specialized training in imaging, all sorts of imaging, including CAT scan, MRI, ultrasound, and regular X-rays, as you're all familiar with. So we evaluate studies performed, write a report, and act as a consultant to the healthcare providers that refer the cases to us.
And give me an example of what a healthcare provider that would refer someone to you. Is it another doctor?
Generally, it's doctors, but it can be nurse practitioners, physician assistants. Usually, those are the other non-MD healthcare providers who refer to us.
So you're a medical doctor.
Yes,
Could
MD.
you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Yes. Well, undergraduate, I graduated from Brandeis University outside of Boston. I then went to medical school at Yale University School of Medicine in New Haven, Connecticut. Following my medical school training, I did a residency in internal medicine, also at Yale. And I then went into diagnostic radiology, where I did a residency, followed by a one-year fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania.
And when did you complete all of this training, approximately?
1987.
Right. And since 1987 to the present, have you been a radiologist?
Yes.
Do you have any special certifications or designations that you have associated with your practice of radiology?
Well, I'm board certified in both internal medicine and diagnostic radiology.
Do you have any subspecialties related to radiology?
Well, I have been a neuroradiologist when I was in practice in Connecticut. I currently still do neuroradiology, but I also do a lot of general radiology as well.
Okay. Have you been affiliated with different hospitals and or had privileges at different hospitals throughout your career?
Yes. When I was in the first part of my career, I spent in almost close to 30 years in Connecticut. I was on the staff of about 10 separate hospitals up there. when I moved to Florida about 10 years ago. Initially, I was employed with a group in which I was on the staff of 4 different hospitals, and currently now working with the University of Pennsylvania. I have privileges at 3 hospitals.
Could you explain to us how it is that you could be a radiologist that works for a hospital in Pennsylvania but be living in Florida?
Yes, well, that's a nice arrangement, I have to say. But since these days so much is available over the internet and with computers, we don't use film anymore. Everything in radiology now is digital, and it has no boundaries. So even somebody who's working in a small private practice basically functions as a remote radiologist, and what you have are information systems in hospitals that you can tie into through the internet and essentially read cases from anywhere, as long as you have the proper equipment to do so.
And have you had an opportunity before to render expert opinions in courts?
Yes.
Could you give us an idea of what jurisdictions you've been involved in the course of your career rendering expert opinions?
Well, I got involved doing medical legal consulting early on in my career, and I've continued to do that throughout my entire career. I have predominantly, I have evaluated cases that are both personal injury type cases, car accidents and that type of thing, or medical malpractice cases. So I've been called on to consult in a variety of different areas.
Right. And have you ever testified before in other states concerning matters of that nature? Have you ever testified in court regarding matters?
Oh, yes, I've testified on a number of occasions.
Okay. And does that include in Florida?
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about what a radiologist does during their 8-hour day. I can hear radiologists, and I've broken bones, and they've put X-rays up on the wall and pointed out things. What is it that you actually do every day?
Well, we look at a lot of pictures. Basically, when I'm working for the hospital, we have a page with on the computer with a big list of cases on it, and they can come from anywhere, within the hospital system. And essentially, you just click on a case, a patient name, and the computer populates the screen, and you look at the images, and basically that's what the radiologist's day consists of. We do have to compare images with earlier studies. We get involved with many consultations with physicians, getting phone calls, and or making phone calls and things of that nature. But generally, a radiologist is reading and interpreting radiology studies.
Okay. Now, you said earlier that you get these studies, or you get requests from other practitioners to read studies. Tell us a short list of studies. We're talking about X-rays, MRIs, PET scans. Generally speaking, that's what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. For example, if would one of the practitioners that might send or have studies done to have you read, would that include like a neurologist?
Yes, very frequently.
Would it include like an orthopedic doctor?
Yes.
So your job is to look at these films, and then what do you do with that information that you have?
Well, we generate a report, it gets sent to the doctor, and the doctor reads it. In some cases where there is more urgency because of critical findings, we may call the physician directly or somebody that's taking care of the patient directly to give them the information sooner than they would have received it otherwise.
So, can other doctors read MRIs and X-rays and things like that?
Well, everybody basically has their own specialty. Physicians do look at their own X-rays, but generally the X-rays are interpreted by a radiologist, a report is generated, and that gets sent to the physician. Physicians generally don't do their, well, let me put it this way. Some physicians do their own imaging. Some non-radiologists do their own imaging. But generally, imaging is done in the radiology department. And even physicians, other than like orthopedics, where they do X-rays, if an orthopedist, for example, owns an MRI machine, which happens in some places, they don't read the MRIs themselves. They usually hire or work with a radiologist to interpret those. So the advanced studies, for the most part, are always initially interpreted by a radiologist, and then the referring clinician may look at the study on their own and sometimes come to a different conclusion, but usually it's in agreement with what the radiologist says.
And you've been doing this since around 1986, 87?
Yes, over 35 years.
Has the technology improved over that period of time?
Oh, very dramatically, yes.
And you are familiar with what you are exposed to the latest technology based on what's available out in the
Yes.
medical technical world?
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, you've been called as a rebuttal witness for a defense witness named Dr. Mark Rubino. And what I want to do is show you some of the things that the jury was shown yesterday and get some of your comments on that. And I'm going to skip through a couple of slides. And first, can you see those from where you are?
Yes, I can.
All right. I want to start with this slide that has a square around it. Yesterday, Dr. Rubino told the jury 99% that is a tumor. You're a radiologist. Have you had a chance to see some of these films?
Yes.
And this is the one that the defense, Dr. Rubino, said or used. Could you tell the folks in the jury your interpretation of that as a radiologist with 30 years of experience?
Well, that is a very small area of increased signal for whiteness. Signal is the term that we use in MRI. It's a very small area of increased signal in the left parietal region, and parietal region is an area of the brain. This has a very benign appearance. It's totally nonspecific. We see things like this very frequently, in fact, on a daily basis. It does not have the appearance of a tumor to me. It has an appearance of a nonspecific lesion, and most of the time when you see solitary small areas like that, that's what they are, just nonspecific. These kinds of things are frequently seen in the general population. There are various etiologies for these, many of them benign. Sometimes you can have a more concerning substrate or pathology underlying that. But I would say that the vast majority of the time you see something like this, it's a benign, inconsequential lesion. When I was in practice in Connecticut, we did a lot of imaging. I was one of the pediatric neuroradiologists, and we read a lot of cases on children. And they would have findings like this, oftentimes as an incidental finding, and it's found in the setting of a workup for something else, like most commonly probably would be headache. You know, you do an MRI, and sometimes you find little things, and they're inconsequential. And generally what we would do when we saw something like this is we would say, you know, I'm not sure what it is. We'll follow it for a while. And if there's no change, stop following it. And, you know, you don't need to have a patient like that get serial, yearly MRI scans for the rest of their life. I mean, you do it a few times, make sure that there's nothing growing there, and you're done with it. So I would not say that this is categorically a tumor. I just don't think you can make that assertion, and it has a very nonspecific and benign appearance.
And when you say a nonspecific and benign appearance, obviously you have over 30 years of looking at these things. What about that is nonspecific and benign as opposed to something that would be not benign?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. The things that suggest that this is not worrisome are the following. The lesion is very well circumscribed. That is, the margins, the edges of the lesion are very clearly defined. Usually if you have a tumor, oftentimes there may be infiltration into the surrounding tissue. We don't see any of that here. We don't see edema. Edema is swelling or increased fluid, inflammation adjacent to the lesion. We don't see that here. It's too small to produce any sort of what's termed mass effect. Mass effect is basically when you have something growing and it pushes against other structures, it can push them from one direction to or another. We don't see any of that here. Now, it's important to realize also that with a lesion, a bright lesion like that, bright also meaning increased whiteness, with a brighter lesion like that, there are a variety of things that can cause these types of findings. It could be head trauma. It could be, you know, post concussion. It can be Lyme disease. It can be multiple sclerosis. It can be small vessel disease. Small vessel disease being like atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries that you might have. Of course, many people have that condition. That's something that increases with age. But there are a variety of things that can cause this. And it's really not possible to look at something like that and say it is absolutely one thing or another.
So you would disagree with Dr. Rubino that there's 99% certainty that that is a tumor.
Yes.
All right, let me flip through a couple more here. Here's another view. I guess this is from a different direction. You
Yes.
still have the same findings based on this?
Same findings. So we're looking at
Oh,
things,
sorry.
we're looking at things in different planes here. So the first image that we looked at was an axial cut. There are three cardinal planes in radiology. Axial, which is cut like this, slices through the body. Okay, coronal, where you have slices cut up and down from front to back. And sagittal, which is side to side. So basically, we do this in different planes to display the finding that we're looking at and look at it in different ways to try to get more information about its anatomic location, its behavior, and that type of thing. So that being said, this image is a coronal image, and I would also point out that with MRI, we do different, what are called pulse sequences. So we take multiple views of the anatomy, but we use different parameters. But we use different parameters to display the images. So this is more what's called a T2 weighted image. And that's why the coloration, the blackness and whiteness is different from image to image, but that's a little bit of an aside.
But no changes from
No,
what we saw the first time?
no.
All right. This is, actually, let me point out to you, you were able to hear some, but my understanding from yesterday is this is the item that we saw
Correct.
the first two slides, but now we're looking, I guess, from the side.
Yes,
I know that's the wrong word, but to me, that's the side of my head.
that's correct.
Okay. So any changes in your opinion or your thoughts based on this slide? And let me skip through a couple other ones. This is location data, I guess. There's a comparison, let me skip through that, I'm going to get back to that in a minute. There's a comparison between a 2013, for the jury's, for the record, that would be the one on the right, and then a 2023 study that was apparently done by Dr. Rubino. And the, almost shows it. No, it doesn't work. At any rate, these are two images approximately 10 years apart, on the right and on the left. Any comments on the fact that one looks like it's maybe a little bigger?
Yeah. Can I get up and?
Yeah,
scoot down?
absolutely. Is that, I'm sorry, I should have said it's your courtroom, I apologize.
Or do you have the laser pointer?
I do, but I'm not sure that it, oh, yeah, if you get close enough, it'll work. I don't think it's going to work from back there, but if you want to get up, let's see if you press the red thing there. You might have to get closer to the table. Oh,
Okay, no, it's working. Okay. So, a couple of things I want to just make a point about here. First of all, I believe this study is 2013, right?
Yes.
So, if you look down here, you can see that the slice thickness there, I can't even see it, was, the slice thickness is 5 millimeters here, I believe. And here, it's 3 millimeters. The other thing to notice is that when you do serial images, even if it's the same patient, even if it's the same day, you're never going to get things exactly in the same plane. The slice, because of where the technologist starts the scan, stops the scan, how thick the slices are, all sorts of variables, you pretty much are in the same place, but you may be off by a few millimeters one way or the other. Now, if you look at the other structures around this, like say for example right here. Now you don't see a corresponding similarity in this area here. It looks a little different there, doesn't it? I mean, here we see sort of a linear white line with a bright area in the center. You don't see that here. This is probably a little bit of it. So the point is that these are probably very close, but not exactly in the same slice. And that, of course, is going to change your view, because we're taking these very thin slices. But if you're offset by just a little bit, you're going to have different tissue in that particular slice. So you've got to look at something like this and kind of interpolate in your mind and say, well, am I looking at the same thing, or is it slightly different? Has it really grown? And a lot of times with tiny little things like this, you can't really be sure. But I think that at least some of the difference here can be accounted for purely by technical reasons, not on the basis of any intrinsic growth, but just by the differences in where the slice was selected.
Okay, and so the slice selection, I guess if I laid down in an MRI machine and they started the scan, again, on my forehead or the top of my head, if I'm in or out of the machine a little bit different than the last time I laid in there by a quarter of an inch or whatever it is,
Right.
that might change this a little bit.
Yes, yes.
The other thing you pointed out, and I might be a little closer, is that the one on this side, and I'm not sure if the folks in the jury can see it, this down here says 5 millimeter.
Yes.
Okay, that is in 2013. This says 3 millimeter.
Yeah, I believe that is the slice thickness. I'm not entirely sure of that, but I...
Okay. Well, if it is this, and that does happen, though. We do
Yeah.
have slice thickness differences. Different MRI machines, different technology. But as far as the thickness of the slice, can that also appear to change the size of a particular image depending on how thick the slice is of what you're seeing?
Yes, it can certainly do that.
I'm going to go down to, this was the doctor explaining white matter lesions, but I have your own PowerPoint on that. Now this is one that we're looking at where there's a comparison between I'll walk up here. On the left side, this is a study from March of 2013, and the jury's heard a lot of testimony about that, and this is the top of the head, I guess. And then this one is from December of 2023. Dr. Rubino testified that the area up here, compared to the old study, showed that there was atrophy of the brain, meaning, I guess that means shrinkage,
Yes.
and that you could see that between these two different studies. What are your comments on that?
Can I have the pointer, please?
Certainly. I don't know if that's going to make it that far.
So just make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. This area right here
I don't think you're.
is what he's calling atrophy?
That was my understanding from what the area at the top. There was a greater space.
Well, that is not even the brain. That is part of the calvarium and the frontal sinus. The brain, the margin of the brain is right here. Okay, that is the most, the part of the brain that's closest to the front. Okay? It's really no different here. And normally when you see atrophy, you see increased space between the convolutions of the brain, which are called gyri and sulci. And these are virtually identical to that. There's no frontal atrophy on that study.
Okay, so you would disagree with Dr. Rubino
Yes,
on that?
there is no atrophy on that study.
How about scar tissue? I think that might have been brought up as well. They use the term scar tissue. Do we?
I don't see anything that looks like scar tissue. I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Okay. I want to go back up here just a bit, because there was another area that was Dr. Rubino testified to. Okay. That was it right there. Okay. Yesterday, Dr. Rubino talked about, and what kind of a scan is this for the
It's a PET scan.
A PET scan. So in this area, there was a contrast. I'm not sure this really works. I'm going to stand over here if I can. This area, Dr. Rubino testified, was a much lighter area than the corresponding area on this side, and that this area was therefore consuming more energy or more sugar, which would be indicative of a live tumor, substantiating the fact that that dot we talked about, that lesion, I think you called it, was clearly a tumor based on the PET scan and the lightness of that. What comments, if any, do you have on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that you have to be a little careful, looking at only one image. But it seems to me that when you, well, let me put it this way. When you look at an image with advanced technology like PET scan or MRI or CAT scan, you can change the appearance of that, and it's called windowing and leveling. And I won't go into what that is, but suffice it to say that it changes, it doesn't change the information you're given, but it changes how it's displayed. And, when I look at this image, I'm a little concerned that it may just be set to parameters that make it look whiter, and it really is not. And it's normal to have a little asymmetry, and again, because that can be because of anatomic variation, how the patient is positioned. But I would also say that if you look at that scan, and again, I'm sorry, can I have the...
If it doesn't show up, I can kind of point out.
That's okay. But I mean, if I look at this area, that degree of whiteness there, and I look, for example, over here.
Can you all see the red thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I think it's missing from, because I think it's partially the TV screen is on an angle, so maybe if you're in front of it, but they're on the side of it, so you may be better off to point.
So, if I look at this, this is basically no detail in there. It's completely white, okay? If I look at this area, it's completely white. This area is completely white. This area is completely white. I mean, there's a lot of other areas that are white. And sometimes when you change the windows and levels to look at things more clearly, you can see that maybe it's artifactual because of the windows and levels that were set. But the other thing is, I think as a general rule, a lesion like the one that we were looking at on the MRI with such a benign appearance is very unlikely to have a positive PET scan. Number one, it's almost too small to resolve. I mean, with a PET scan, you need to have hypermetabolic, which is something that's taking up a lot of the glucose that's used. I know you heard about that yesterday. But it would be very unusual for a tiny hypermetabolic lesion for a tiny lesion like that, with a benign appearance, to be hypermetabolic, that is increased utilization of glucose, and then to occupy an area which is probably, 5 or 10 times as big as the lesion itself. So, I would simply say that I can't make any determination of what that image shows.
Can you switch them over? So, Dr. Blickstein, you did a very short PowerPoint just to kind of explain. I've asked you to interpret what Dr. Rubino has testified to and get your opinions and impressions on his findings. And I'll have to click through it with you. I'm not sure your arm will get close enough. So we'll start with the first one, and we'll go through briefly. Tell me a little bit about what we're going through slide by slide here.
Yes. Well, let me just come.
And you can come down and you can click to your heart's content, but I think you got to be closer.
I think just for the future slides, it would be better for me to be close. But I'm not going to go through all the verbiage on the initial slides, but suffice it to say that I just put in a few slides just to show facts about white matter hyperintensities. Just read the very first line on this. White matter hyperintensities are very common incidental findings on brain MRI scans. Okay, next.
You got it. You want me to?
Okay. Prevalence of white matter hyperintensity in young clinical patients. Bottom line. Whoops. Bottom line.
Get your back where you were.
Okay. As said in the bottom on the conclusion, white matter hyperintensity is frequently found in young clinical patients. White matter lesions on magnetic resonance imaging. As it says in the first line, common finding on T2 and FLAIR sequences. So the point is just to reiterate that these are common lesions, and
Even in young people.
And even in young people, correct. So here are just some examples of typical white matter lesions. You can see them all there. They have various sizes and morphologies. This one actually looks similar to the one that we have, that we see with Mr. Xavier. These are just some examples of some early gliomas. These are malignant tumors. Not Mr. Xavier, but you can, whoops, sorry, I'm not used to this thing. Okay, so, a lesion we can see there. See another smaller lesion there. In this case, it actually enhances with contrast, and enhancement is one of the things that's very important.
Was that D up at the top right that you were just pointing at? Because I can't see the red thing myself.
Yes, the top.
So the top D at the very top on the
Yes,
right. Okay.
yes, the top D. Okay, now just some additional pictures of low-grade gliomas. The arrows show where the lesions are. One of the things you can see, for example, in this one, is that the margins are not quite as well circumscribed as they are on the study of interest today. Again, just examples to show low-grade gliomas, but these have different types of appearances. Now, I'm not going to say that, every glioma is going to be characteristic, but here you can see features that suggest a glioma in that we've got abnormal signal in the center of the lesion on this contrast study. It's hyperintense and white on other pulse sequences. Another example of a glioma, notice the fuzzy margin around this, which again is missing on the MRI in question today. Just another example of a low-grade glioma.
Now, I'm going to stop you there for a
Yes.
second. So this is, and I can do some things here. We'll go back one, I think. Okay, so is this the glioma over
Yes,
here? And
yes.
it's kind of fuzzy around the edges as opposed to
Exactly.
being defined like I drew a nice
Right.
line around it. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. I might need assistance. Go ahead.
So again, here we have the study in question today, showing this lesion much less visible than any of the other ones that are that I showed that are documented gliomas, and basically another scan showing that there's no enhancement with the lesion, which is also somewhat reassuring and more consistent with a benign lesion. But nonetheless, it could also, you may not get enhancement with a glioma, so that does not exclude the possibility of that, but it makes it less likely. And this final slide, illustrating my opinions and conclusions, which are white matter lesions are very common incidental findings on MRI. The white matter lesion we see has characteristically benign findings, and none of the studies that I looked at that I saw would appear to show anything that would be a lesion that would cause a behavioral consequence.
Now, just as kind of my last question before you get cross-examined, is there anything, as you look at this from your 30-something years of experience, is there anything that you would have want to seen that would potentially change what you see here? I mean, is there something, even though you looked at what Dr. Rubino has shown and you've seen some of the studies, is there some big gap out there where that there's another study that would suddenly change what you see in those films that we've talked about?
The only thing that would change that would be a biopsy.
Okay. And a biopsy, of course, is an invasive procedure where you have to go in and, okay. And as a radiologist, who I understand is the one that kind of informs the other practitioners of, hey, you got a problem here, is that something as a radiologist that you would look at and say, that's a problem, we need to biopsy it?
No, as I said, I think in my experience and the way that I've handled these kinds of situations in the past, the recommendation in the report would be that it's an indeterminate, probably benign lesion, recommend follow-up in whatever, 1 year or something like that.
And in this case, we actually have 10 years.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
I do think we agree about some things, so I'm just going to confirm those agreements, and then we'll talk about where maybe we're veering off. Okay. We agree that what's on Zephyr scan is definitely alive. This is not dead tissue, right?
Correct.
And I think we also agree, I mean, we're not saying that this is a malignant tumor, so you agree with us about that.
Okay.
Okay. We're saying this is a low-grade, grade 1 tumor. So are you saying that there's no way that this can be a tumor, or there is a way it can be a tumor, it's just not malignant?
Well, you know, nothing is 100% in medicine, and I would say to within a reasonable degree of medical probability, it is not a tumor.
Okay. Can something that is benign become malignant?
That has, there are conditions where that can occur, yes.
Okay. And you had some slides up on the PowerPoint where you talked about tumors usually enhance.
Correct.
Not all the time, though, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you said that what you think you're looking at is normal tissue. Is it true that the lower the grade of tumor, the more normal the tissue looks? It's not until you get to higher grades that it starts to look more and more abnormal.
That's fair to say.
Okay. And do we agree or disagree that it was there in 2013 and is now bigger? You disagree with me about that?
Well, quite honestly, I went back to the 2013 scan and looked at that. I could not even find the lesion.
What about the picture?
Well, that little dot, yes, but on the axial images, I could not reproduce that.
Okay. So it sounds like there's at least a little bit of disagreement. If the jury believes that it was there in 2013 and they believe that it's bigger, is growth indicative of disease function?
Well, I think the question is, you know, whether, I think I pointed out several factors that can contribute to why the lesion looked
Sure,
different
but
from
if
one
they
to
believe
another.
that it's actually bigger now, generally speaking, is growth proof of disease function?
Well, if you're asking me simply the question, if something grows, does that mean there's active disease? Is that the question?
If a lesion is growing, is that a clue that it is moving toward becoming malignant?
I don't know that I could say that. It would probably be the case, yes.
Okay. The jury heard from Dr. Rubino yesterday, who quoted an article from the
Wait,
National...
Excuse me for 1 second. I don't mean to interrupt, but
Okay.
can I just amend that previous answer?
about growth generally being indicative that something is becoming diseased?
You use specifically the word malignant.
Okay.
I don't think I would say that it necessarily reflects something that is malignant. It could simply be something that's benign that's growing too.
Okay. The jury heard yesterday from Dr. Rubino that he quoted an article from the National Institute of Health that said, I'm going to read you this sentence, you tell me you agree or disagree. Some people with low-grade glioma, a type of brain tumor, can live for years, even decades, without the disease worsening. But eventually, these cancers start to grow and little is known about why or how this happens. Do you agree or disagree with the National Institute of Health on that point?
Well, I would have to disagree with that. There is some truth to a certain degree, but you know, they're making a categorical statement about all lesions. They don't know what all lesions are, and the fact of the matter is...
Can I read it again? It says some people, so they're not making a categorical statement.
Yeah,
They're saying
well, maybe some people that they specifically have evaluated, but they're, you know, the other point is that most people who have lesions like this, you would never know it because there's no reason to image them, and the lesions themselves don't do anything. You would never even know it's there unless you found it as an incidental finding on another study.
So do you agree or disagree that some people with low-grade glioma can live for years or even decades without the disease worsening? Do you agree or disagree with that?
It's probably true.
Okay. There was a slide on there that talked about focal seizures. We heard about this yesterday, but can you explain how a focal seizure is different? If you know, because I know you're a radiologist, not a neurologist, but I'm pretty sure you know the answer to this. Can you explain how a focal seizure is different than these grand mal, tonic-clonic, scary seizures that people see, that involves like muscle spasms and unconsciousness?
Yes, well, my understanding is that a focal seizure will only involve one portion of the brain and manifest itself by whatever those symptoms happen to be, whether it's arm twitching or sneezing or whatever. And then a grand mal seizure, of course, is just a generalized global electrical discharge in the brain where every muscle contracts, and it's a general phenomenon.
Do focal seizures always have a physical manifestation that other people can see?
No.
Okay.
No.
Can a focal seizure cause someone to have sensory hallucinations that involve one of the five senses?
Yes, I believe that's true.
Okay. The white matter lesion slide. I saw the slide that said that they're common in young people. More common in older people though, right?
Correct.
Okay. And less common in young children. So maybe they're common in young adults, but less common in young children.
That's probably true, yes.
Okay. Can tumors start in white matter?
Yes.
And you talked a little bit on direct about how if you saw this in your office, UPenn sends you a scan and you saw it, you may refer them to a surgeon. Not being a surgeon yourself, you cannot say that whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to try to take this thing out though, right?
That would be a surgical decision, yes.
Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Why can't, we can do, for certain cancers, I know you're not an oncologist, but for certain cancers, you can do like marker testing or blood testing, like breast cancer, pancreatic cancer. Why can't we just give Zephan a blood test and see if he has brain cancer?
I don't know of a blood test that has been devised for that.
Okay. Have you ever misdiagnosed someone?
Yes.
Okay. So even though you went to Yale and you work for UPenn, everybody's capable of doing that, right?
Well, as a radiologist, if you're reading 10 or 15,000 cases a year, you're going to make some mistakes, and unfortunately, that's the reality. But it does happen.
And the PET image that you said could have been, the settings could have been manipulated to make certain areas look brighter. Would you agree when you come to court and testify that it's important to be prepared and to have reviewed all of the supporting documentation before coming in here and speaking?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that whatever side hires you is responsible for giving you all that information?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that if you had seen another image in another setting, that would have proven that we had done that, you would have brought it here and showed it to us?
Yes, but I think the way that, my comments on that image were simply that there were other areas that looked virtually identical to the one that was being singled out.
Well, but you did say that you can manipulate the settings, right, to make certain areas look brighter at certain times?
Yes.
And you thought that was possibly what's going on?
Yes.
Are you aware that in the PET scans there were 253 images?
Well, that would be typical, yes.
Okay, and you don't have one to show us to prove that we did that we manipulated settings?
No, I didn't have that.
Nothing further.
No redirect.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
So you're excused and free to go about your business.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, I think we talked about this in front of the jury. The remaining of the rebuttal witnesses for the state would be here Monday. We were able to call Dr. Glickstein in to fill a little bit of a gap so our day doesn't run long on Monday. But I think he told the jury that we would be ending a little bit early. So that is our witness.
We don't have any more to present to you today, so we are going to give you a lovely, almost day off. So we will reconvene on Monday morning. We are going to get together on Monday morning at 8:30, as we have been, and we will continue on. And we want you to have a good weekend. Please don't do the things I keep telling you. Don't do social media. Watch the news, read the newspaper, listen to the news on the radio. But have a good weekend. If you have an appointment, maybe you can set that for this afternoon or something and take care of your business matters. We will see you Monday morning. Thank you very much.
All right, you guys in the jury? Do you know that, please?
I know we have some other matters to take up outside the presence of the jury. Y'all want, I think we should have, absolutely. Y'all take the recess that you need for the morning, and we'll get back together after a little while and work through some of the other things that we need to take care of. Thank you. Yes. That's it for the streaming of the presentation of the case. The other things we'll be doing are kind of sidebar motions and things like that for the presentation. Yes, you can end the stream.